Hey everyone, do you want to up your cloud game and draw real and natural looking clouds like this one? Today I'll show you the techniques I use to draw this cloud. Now before we jump into the tutorial, let me show you the tools quickly. Of course we have pencils, I'm using a 2B pencil today, some blending tools, and some erasers. I'll link to these specific erasers down in the description. These are going to be the most important thing we're using today. Lastly, I do like to keep a piece of sandpaper nearby. Here is the cloud reference image we'll be drawing today. I'll put a link to this also down in the description if you want to follow along with me. So first, I'm going to roughly draw this cloud in and fill in the first section. The technique I'm going to show you today is a 3-step process, with the majority of the time being spent on the last step, finessing all of the details. Okay, now let's work on this next section of the cloud together. I'm just going to do something around this section here. So first step, we're just going to shade this background in. I'm not getting all the way to my outline of the cloud. I just want to get near it, and we're going to finesse all those details on the upcoming steps. For this whole drawing, I'm going to be using a 2B pencil, but if there's another pencil you prefer, go for it. So that sky there is pretty good for the tutorial. Now, obviously, if you're going to spend a lot of time and work really hard on a drawing, you're going to want to get your sky here nice and smooth. Now step 2 in the process is we're just going to loosely block in all these shadows here. Note the angle that I'm holding on the blending tool here. I don't want any really intense circles like this that take a little more work to erase out. Of course, if you do that, not a big deal, we can fix it. And it is better to shade in too much rather than too little, because we're going to sort of use a relief method after this where we're going to erase a lot of the texture and clouds in. Just sort of let your blending tool flow a little bit. When you look really close at clouds, there usually is not a lot of super bright whites with no shadows in it. I have a computer off screen with this reference image pulled up, and I can see a lot more of these details of just slight shadowy areas and clouds within clouds. And that's more what I'm referencing here. Just get in here and put a lot of marks down. The good thing about this method is you can't really make mistakes. You just give yourself a lot of different options for however you want to shape these clouds. A little trick that I like to do if I want less lead on my blending tools, I use a piece of sandpaper and I'll just sand it off like that. Kind of revitalizes your blending tool. So we'll say this is good for now. Alright, so let's move on to the next step where we're really going to finesse all of these details. And I'm just going to start working on these edges. It doesn't just go from the sky to the cloud. There's sort of a gradient. I'm just sort of looking at the reference image at this point to make sure I don't do anything that's kind of way out of whack. But in terms of shape, I don't really care too much about matching that at all, really. You want to make sure you get all that detail so it looks super realistic. And part of that is just being random. Let whatever happen, happen. You can see now I'm working on where these two clouds sort of intermingle here. We're going to go back through and blend that. And pretty quickly here, I'm going to be heavily relying on my eraser for a lot of these shadows and textures. This is just one of those little Faber-Castell erasers. That's what makes it really good for building these clouds. You can just sort of dab in these soft little gradients, and you have to work really hard to take off all the pencil, but that's the thing, is you don't want to take off all the pencil. You just want to take off little layers of it. See all these the under part of the cloud there where it just kind of pokes out? We want to get all that. I'm just sort of dabbing and just taking off the top layer. You just want that organic texture. Break it up a little bit. Don't make it even. The fact that this eraser can't take very much off without a lot of effort, use that to your advantage. You're just sort of poking these little highlights into your shadows. And that's when this works really well. Make your clouds feel really natural. There's so much texture and shadows within clouds. You put your base layer down with your blending tool, and then you use your eraser as sort of a relief tool to draw the whites back in, draw the highlights back in. I'm just doing little circular motions, and you can see the eraser here gets full of the lead. Just wipe that off. This is a piece of sandpaper. Just wipe it off, and I'm just doing little sort of dabs and circles. You know, and of course you're still working the blending tools as you go. Like, this looks like it needs a little bit of work, but now that I'm getting into it, I can be a lot more definitive with what I want to do. Maybe this needs a little more grain here. As you're drawing your cloud, you should pick what spots you want to be your brightest whites, and then kind of dial everything else back from that. But see, none of this is super smooth. All these have little ridges, little gradients within it, and using this eraser can help you achieve that. You know, sometimes things feel too drawn on, and this method kind of alleviates that. Just going to continue to work the bottom here where you see the cloud and this black sky come together. Got this really steep angle on it, so things are applied pretty softly. See how soft I can do that there, whereas opposed to this, everything is super pointed. And clouds are just gaseous balls of water in the sky, so you want things to be soft. I'm just going to blend this up a little bit, just sort of pulling from this black part up. Pull this down a little bit more. Just adding a little more pencil so I can get this a little darker. So now we're going to go back in and really start to sort of poke holes in all these shadows with our eraser. Just really small little movements. I'm looking at the reference image quite a bit, just not because I want it to be exactly like that, but I just sort of want to be in line with the realism of that, you know what I mean? But just these little dabs take just enough off to create the realism that I want. See, that started to add just super fine details. It's kind of full of lead, so we clear it off on our sandpaper a little bit. So you're just slowly working over all the details with these same methods over and over. And do it all sort of freeform. You know, have a reference image for inspiration, but definitely don't hold yourself to it. You just want things to look natural and super detailed. This method of poking holes into it with your eraser, it's so easy to just get natural, real textures on it. So there are two spots right here and right here where I think are kind of my brightest whites, and that's where I use this electric eraser. I'm just going to go in and really make those pop. I'm just doing little dabs. But with that, we do probably got to go in and finesse them a little bit. Just keep working like this over and over through your whole cloud, and you're going to really come out with something phenomenal. See this, like this right here? These are the sort of things you're going for. Look at all that texture there. They're not highlights, but these little blips of white popping into the shadow. That is what we're going for. Let's get up here. This kind of comes in a bit more. We're going to create this little swirly thing here. This gets a little straight here, but you see it has all these little light wispy clouds coming off. We're just going to pop those in like this. Just doing little spins of the eraser. You know, just sort of roughing them in, and we'll go back and finesse as needed. Just create all those little wispy clouds in this same relief format. Now, if you do want to take off a little chunk of this pencil more significantly, an electric eraser like this can do wonders. Say you want a little blip in there going in like that. Just pop it in. But we're going to want to add some shadow into that now. So now up here, we're just doing the same relief process over and over. I'm going to add these little textures in. I like when little holes in the clouds give that realism. Okay, so this point in the process is just continuing to work all the details in this fashion. These little dabs are the sort of the bread and butter of, you're just taking off slight layer by slight layer. Just little dabs, and let your pencil and blending tools and eraser flow. That's how you're going to get these nice, soft pillow clouds, you know. Notice I'm not leaving any edges, just smooth. They all have little ridges and bumps, a little bit of a gradient on them. Now, don't get discouraged if you're not always happy with the way your clouds are shaping up, but you just got to sort of trust your process. Just sort of letting things kind of flow and dance together here. Keeping all those organic textures and shapes in mind. You want to make sure you get all that stuff. Of course, like all my tutorials, stand up, take a look from a distance every once in a while. There are lots of little adjustments I want to make, but I'll probably save a lot of that to the end when I have my full cloud. This is a constant evolving of the cloud. I'm not just one and done here. You work it, you work a different section, you come back, see how they work together. I'm always thinking about how these interact with each other and how to bring in that realism. I want to get a little bit of something up here. If this tutorial is helping you at all, I'd love if you would like and subscribe. Again, I love getting into these details like this. I'm going to be doing more tutorials like this. Just constantly refining all these little details to pull off the realism here, you know. I think it's starting to look pretty good. Looking from a distance, I feel like this is a little too harsh here. This top part of this cloud should be brighter than the bottom. Just soften that up a little bit. Got some great random texture and clouds coming up in here. Really pulls off that sort of wispy piece coming off there. I think for the most part, this part up here is looking pretty good. Of course, I say that, then I add a little bit, but yeah. See how just slightly I'm touching the paper there. Just nice and soft, kind of blend it in, take your eraser, give it some variety. Maybe go back with a little bit of deeper blacks. Okay. So as we wrap up, just some final advice. Be sure to be patient with yourself. These things take time, especially when you're trying to get this amount of detail. It takes a lot of work. Getting upset with yourself is only going to get in the way. Just be loose with it. Remember, nothing really can wreck your drawing besides maybe putting a hole in the paper, or I guess giving up. Giving up will, otherwise just let it flow, right? So we're getting pretty close here on this final section. If this were for a final drawing, I'm sure I'd spend a lot more time on it, but seeing as this is probably just going to sit in this notebook for the rest of my days, never being looked at again, it's hard for me to want to spend more time on it. But one final step as things are wrapping up. So I want to just take a step back and look at the full cloud and make sure things look cohesive, make sure nothing stands out in a bad way. Just kind of give your whole cloud a final once-over. Now, if you enjoyed this tutorial, I'd really appreciate a like and subscribe. Also, feel free to ask any questions down in the comments. Again, this reference image is in the description. And thanks for watching, and good luck on your cloud drawings.